Hey guys, welcome back to Brutally Honest, a WoW podcast. Just wrapped up episode 8 with Draganos, Tactics, and Preheat. Fantastic episode with these guys, talking about all things Midnight, UI, class pruning. You get the idea. You know what's coming. But speaking of what's coming, we are 2 months out from Midnight launching, so we had a lot to talk about with where things are and where things might land. Because pre-patch is a month away, game expansion release is 2 months away. So anyway, enjoy that. Real quick, however, if you're consuming this on YouTube or frankly, wherever you're consuming this content, check out the description. You'll find everyone's Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, personal websites, etc., etc. Go follow these guys, go sub, go enjoy these guys, enjoy their company. Show them a little bit of love. They took time out of their schedule this weekend, and frankly, do that for every episode of this podcast so far. Similarly, you can follow along my Twitch, my YouTube, all of my stuff as well if you want to be alerted to the next episode, if you want to come hang out with me on a regular basis while I'm streaming on Twitch. But yeah, check that out, man. Go follow, go sub, go have fun. My name's Brutall. I'm going to get out of my own way, enjoy the episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is episode 8 of Brutally Honest, a WoW podcast. And of course, I have with me this week 3 amazing people who have taken time out of their week to sit down with us. We're going to talk about them in a moment. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We are about 2 months out from Midnight, which is kind of crazy to sit here and think about. That's close enough for hype, starting to solidify into some expectations. And of course, expectations can be a little dangerous. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but today it's not about buying into Midnight. It's not about tearing it down. I want to take a good, real hard look at what's actually there right now. I want to talk about what's unfinished. I want to talk about what players should realistically expect and prepare for. But before we get too far into that, let's introduce our guests today. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Draganos, we're going to start with you. For anyone who may not be familiar, I don't know how this is possible, by the way, but for anyone who may not be familiar with you, could you tell everyone who you are, who the heck, what the heck you do, where you can be found, and so on and so forth, please?
Yeah, I do like M+ content, not as much M+ content recently, but I've done some MDI like commentary and Race to World First commentary, and then Mythic raid guide videos, and I do a podcast as well, a competitor of yours. So yeah,
there's no competitor, sir. How dare you? We're all on the same team. All right, we're pushing toward the same goal.
I'm trying to grief this podcast to try and make it worse. So watch out. I'm gonna do some dead air in a bit. So right, look out for that.
Whatever, man. I'll fill it in the back. I'll fill it in post. No big deal. I don't think it's possible for anyone to have not heard your name at this point in time. You've been around for years now, doing all kinds of stuff, man. It's crazy. Well, thank you for being here, buddy. Real quick, all of everyone's names underneath their webcam is where you can find them on Twitch, and of course in the YouTube description, Spotify description, all that fun stuff. You can find links to their YouTubes and Twitters and so on and so forth. Preheat, man, thanks for being here, buddy. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I'm actually surprised here. I had no idea. You want to mention the good news real quick?
Oh yeah, I haven't said anything publicly, but
you don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to. I'm not putting you on the spot.
No, it's fine. I already told my guild. They know. So we were raiding just this last Tuesday, and I told everyone, "Hey guys, I got to leave at 8:30. I got a thing going on." And happy to say that I am now a father. Yeah, my daughter is downstairs, 2 years old. So we just got discharged last night.
Old? You just said 2 years old.
Or 2 days. 2 days old. Yeah. I wish. Let's just fast forward. Maybe I'll feel differently in the future, but yeah, no, happy to be here. I used to do world first raiding. Now I do mostly guide writing, raid content, little Mythic Plus content. And just like you, Draganos also haunts my feed. I can't escape him on YouTube.
Man, I don't know many people who would take time to do something like this. Thank you so much, man. I feel extremely grateful for you guys being here, but especially you and with what's going on in your real life. That's so cool. I'm so happy for you. So thank you very much. Tactics, what's up, man? Thanks for being here. Who the heck are you?
You know, I have to top that. What's going on?
Sorry.
But yeah, I'm Tactics. I do a lot of YouTube content. That's where most of my stuff happens. A lot of tank stuff, Mythic Plus, raiding. I've done some Race to World First casting and guide writing as well. So mostly PvE stuff at the end game.
Yeah, I've never been a big PvPer. This has definitely been a strictly PvE experience for me on the podcast so far. Maybe one day I'll invite a PvP team on, but thank you for being here, man. Your guy, I'll admit, I've been watching your tank videos these past few weeks, even before I reached out to you, because God man, Prot Warrior's still my jam. I started playing this game as a Prot Warrior. I still play it quite a bit, and very much looking forward to sinking my teeth into it come midnight. Radness, I want to do a little icebreaker if you're in the mood, all right? So let me set the stage for you, no pun intended. When Metzen stood on that BlizzCon stage a few years back, and he said the next 3 expansions would be unlike anything that had come before it, and then he unveiled the Worldsoul Saga, what was your first initial reaction there? Was it excitement? Was it skepticism or something else?
Yeah, I guess I was pretty excited. I think Metzen, has a way of communicating that's pretty fun to. It's pretty easy to sort of believe, right, when you listen to him, and it's nice to know as well that like they have somebody that passionate sort of in charge of the story and stuff, and so I liked it from that end. Yeah.
Were you expecting it? I mean, it came out of blue for, I'd say, most of us. They'd never done anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, I was really curious what the implications were for the like release schedule, anything like that, which I think still is a question mark. Like, how long are we going to be in midnight, right? How long before Last Titan, for instance?
Yeah. Do you think that this whole saga thing is unfolding well at the moment, or do you think there might have been a few hiccups along the way so far?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the saga, it's mostly like story based, right? The Worldsoul Saga. I feel like War Within definitely has been pretty like if the Worldsoul Saga succeeds, it's because War Within set it up rather than was all that strong on its own, I'd say.
Sure. Preheat, what about you, man? What was your first what were your feelings when it came to the Worldsoul Saga after it was announced?
So I'll be completely honest with you. I'm very susceptible to hype. So even though every time by the end of the expansion, I'm like grumbling, this is the worst thing that they've ever done. How could the game get, I'm always very negative in that moment. But then whenever they show me the new thing, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so great. I can't wait. For sure, they're going to fix it all. They're going to make it all work out. I think whenever we had that unveil, we didn't know the full extent of what they were planning to change when it came to like design philosophy, the squish, add-ons, all that stuff. We didn't have all that baggage associated with it. So it was just like pure positive vibes for me.
Yeah. Would you say that so far it's going well, or are you feeling a little hesitant, a little something else?
Again, I just love new stuff, so I have a lot of fun on the beta, and I played a lot. I usually play the beta more than I play like the first couple weeks of the actual expansion. But yeah, I mean, I'm having fun with it. Obviously, there's always work to be done in the beta. It is a beta, but very excited. I don't really get too caught up in the story of part of things, so the fact that it's a saga doesn't really matter to me. I just want the content to be good. The raiding content, the Mythic Plus. I want my class to feel fun. I want there to be things that keep me engaged. And I will say with housing, it's been keeping me pretty engaged, even though I was not expecting that. Yeah, it's been very fun.
I think everything you just said in the last like 45 seconds, a lot of people would align with and agree with, man. I'm a big fan of like, hey, you know what? Story's all well and good, blah, blah, blah. Make the content good. I just think a lot of people would definitely agree with you there. Tactics. What about you, man? What do you think about the Worldsoul Saga when it was announced?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely interesting, right? Because I think they were coming off of, I think what the big one was like, especially if you're talking about story stuff, was like the failure of Shadowlands, right? And like the jailer, and like, you couldn't build up over the course of an expansion and make it feel important at the end, right? Like the jailer was a pretty anticlimactic, all things considered, villain. And I think the idea of doing this over 3 expansions was, I mean, I was very interested in that, even though I'm not a big lore guy, but it seemed like a smart move, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. War Within, like Dratnos was saying, definitely seems more like a setup expansion. So it'll be cool to see where everything goes.
Does anyone have maybe like a tinfoil hat theory about why we saw the Harnir in the War Within cinematic, and yet they haven't really shown? I mean, a little bit in the War Within, but they're really now showing up at midnight.
I've heard theories that they're from cut content, but I'm not sure I actually believe that.
Yeah, there's just no way of knowing, I suppose. Maybe one day we'll find out, but nevertheless, real quick, Twitch chat, YouTube chat, if any of you guys have a question for any of our guests today, or just a question in general, type in the command question, followed by your question. Our mods will collect it. It'll pop up in Discord and on Nightbot. And if we have time, and if it makes sense, we'll ask those questions. We'll get some viewer involvement there. And for you guys, the three of you, please, I beg of you, if you want to respond to anything anyone says, interrupt me. Let it be known. Talk, hang out, agree, disagree, whatever. Man, this is all about hearing from you guys. I want to take as much of a backseat as possible, so do not be afraid to chime in. That is kind of the point. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to officially get going here with the state of Midnight and how it currently stands in the beta. And we're going to be talking about how it actually feels compared to where we are today in the War Within. And we're going to start with tactics. We're 2 months out, buddy, as we've already established. Do you think Midnight feels more like something that's being polished and about ready for release? Or is it something still kind of in the midst of being pieced together?
It's a little bit of both. I would say, like, for example, I think instance content, right? Raid, Mythic Plus, like Blizzard is the king of those forms of content, right? And I think if you're worried about that releasing in a bad state, I would say not to worry at all. Like, that stuff is going to be solid. You know, historically, it's been super solid. I'm not really concerned about that. The UI stuff, it's hit and miss. It's been getting better. It's been getting better. They've been making a lot of positive changes, whether that's to actual UI stuff, the baseline UI stuff, or to peeling back on their restrictions, right? There is positive stuff happening there. And I feel like it'll be in a decent place by launch, but we are, you know, kind of only 2 months away. And I have a feeling it's not going to get 100% of the way there. I think like the biggest concern that I've heard from people is about like buff and debuff tracking. Specifically, it's like kind of rough at the moment. If you're like a dot spec or a hot spec or that kind of stuff, it's a little hard to track that specifically, but it's moving in the right direction.
Do you think that any of the changes that, I don't know if you're, you know, super attuned how to UI stuff, but anything that they announced today that kind of perked your ears up and said, hey, I'm glad that's been, you know, those restrictions have been loosened or that's going to change?
I mean, nothing like super impactful recently. I mean, I think this past week they talked about specifically whitelisting certain abilities for use, which is, it's good that they're doing that. The question is, are they going to get all the abilities that need that? Because Blizzard has to specifically turn it on, right? So if there's an ability you want to be able to track like that and Blizzard decides, no, we're not going to let you do that, then you're out of luck, right? I think it was one of the Devourer things and then one of the Enhancement Shaman things that they recently did. So it's good that they're willing to do that, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that for everything that needs it.
I think it's pretty bad, actually. Like I'm looking at, so it's Soul Fragments and Maelstrom Weapon are the two that were whitelisted recently. But so their theory is like, okay, we want you to not need to download weak auras or add-ons, right, to have your character be optimal. But then if there's something like Soul Fragments or Maelstrom Weapon and their answer is, okay, we'll let the add-ons do it, then aren't we just going to, like, haven't they not solved the problem? They've just made the add-ons more annoying and like worse.
It's still a competitive advantage too.
But it's
right?
still, yeah, if it's still going to be a competitive advantage, like, well, I don't know. It just feels like, what are we doing here, right? Like, what's the point of this if we're not actually going to accomplish the good thing of making it so add-ons aren't required? And like, it's like now your add-ons are still required, but worse. But they're still required, but they are worse. Like that seems, I don't know. It seems like we've kind of lost the plot there.
Yeah, I had the same thought.
Sorry,
I was reading the notes and sorry to cut you off. But I had the same thought where I've read what they were changing in these notes. I'm like, what's the point of this change then if we're not going to just make the in-game tools adapt and show this information clearly to users?
Yeah, I should clarify. When I say it's good, I mean like it's good that, you know, I'd rather have this solution than just not be able to track those at all. Obviously, the ideal solution is there is a baseline Blizzard ability to track these things. But if it goes live without the ability to track it at all, I think it's just net bad.
Oh, and I agree with that too. But I would just say take it a step further and just, let it be the way it was before. Either that or, fix everything in 2 months. But that's a big ask.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, whatever's in the build right now is pretty likely for most classes to be what makes it, right? Like we're close enough to at least a pre-patch that's getting pretty close to locked. But yeah, it strikes me as like, I don't know, so there's the two different things, right? Like there's the encounter weak auras, and I think pretty much everybody is very happy with trying at least a tier probably forever with that gone, right? Like that, at least to the extent that they can, getting rid of those is going to be great, right? Like that seems really good. The stuff of like tracking your characters' resources and things like that one is one where they either need to successfully replicate it with the like base UI, right? Like for everything, like Maelstrom Weapon and Soul Fragments, or they need to back off and let the add-ons come back for those, because doing it on like a piece-by-piece basis where some of the add-ons come back one at a time it's going to be much worse, right? We're going to move to a world where you still need to download add-ons, but Weak Auras is gone, and now you're downloading like 30 different micro add-ons instead of a few different Weak Auras and big add-ons. So I think that like a lot of people have been looking at Midnight already and are like, hang on, I already need more add-ons than I previously did. And I think that's there's some danger of that happening.
Yeah, what's strange to me is that, we have the cooldown manager, and obviously it's been iterated on. It's not perfect, but it's gotten a bit better in some ways. Still can't really track things with multiple charges for some reason, which...
Yeah, it's gotten a lot better, but like it has still a long way to go, right?
All they need to do is allow you to put in your spell ID and manually add it in there, and you can have the buff tracking or debuff tracking that you want. They just won't let you do that for some reason. They have to approve of everything, and of course, they always approve the wrong things, and then you're missing the things that you need. And so you end up in the situation where you need the weak aura, right? And I think that this is kind of them just throwing in the towel and being like, all right, fine, you guys just can take care of this, right?
They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. Like if they're making a decision on a case-by-case basis of whether to let an add-on track something, the more important it is, and the more people feel like the game sucks without being able to track it, the worse it is if they let an add-on do it from their philosophy of making it so add-ons aren't required, because then the add-on is super required, right? So like, I feel like anytime they're whitelisting an important spell, it's like, that's really bad. Like that needs to be not how this happens, right? They need to instead be like, okay, no, that's going to be base UI, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think the whole damned if you do, damned if you don't, that's a good point, because they've kind of painted themselves into this corner to where, I mean, like you guys have all just said, they need to do certain things to make sure that everything's functional and understood and visible and whatnot. But not everything is functional, understood, and visible at the moment, and there's only so much time left. And the people who keep saying, oh, it's only beta, don't worry, I don't think they really understand. Like you said a moment ago, Dratnos, what we have right now is basically what we're almost guaranteed to get during pre-launch and so on and so forth. So, I don't know. It's wild. Dratnos, what do you think is surprisingly solid already in beta? Maybe UI aside.
Yeah, I think most of the specs are in a pretty good place. A lot of them have been toned down quite a bit, and there are a few that are still missing. I would say it's more likely that things are going to feel like undercooked than overcooked with the specs. Whereas in modern WoW, like before this in War Within, there maybe were quite a few more specs that you'd be like, okay, this is a little overcooked. But I think that for the most part, they're in a pretty good spot now. They've fixed a lot. Like Fire Mage, for instance, was one that was really unfortunate. What initially was happening to it, and they largely fixed that. I think Resto Shaman is still probably missing like a little bit of juice, but it's a lot better than the first build as well on that. So yeah, I think the classes are looking like they're going to be in a good opening point especially for a world without add-ons, without being able to, track as much. Yeah. Although, again, that comes back to that issue.
Yeah, we'll see. Preheat, would you agree with that take? How's Fire Mage looking right now?
Yeah, so Fire Mage was a kind of like the perfect example of them just like coming out the gate with just an absolute stinker, right? They dropped it and we're like, what is this, dude? There's no way y'all are serious. But I agree. Over time, they've done a lot to improve it. Also, I will say, like, even though it was super simple and boring initially, the talent design and the things that people were asking for, especially Fire Mages, stuff like not wanting to be an uptime spec anymore, wanting to have like a proper cooldown combustion, wanting combustion to feel like it actually does something, like you aren't just an orange BM hunter, right? These are all things that they actually did. Like they came out right away and it was actually really solid when it came to the design and the talents. The issue was the gameplay was just not fun. It was just very boring. And it felt like it was kind of baby's first spec, right? But now that they've added in a little bit more of that seasoning in there and they're spicing it up a bit, it's actually feeling quite good. And I will say, like, I was having fun playing Fire and all my beta testing since that last pass. They've really kind of brought it back in. Arcane, on the other hand, that's a whole different story. But I will say that at least Frost and Fire, I'm having a lot of fun with both those specs. And if I had to play the current version of Fire or the current version of Frost for Prog, I would not mind right now. I think it's like, yeah, I would have almost as much fun as on live. Yeah, but I'm also someone who kind of likes the complexity, so it's kind of hard to make me feel great about that. But I understand other people want, more simplified.
One of the, or rather, the first viewer question we got, which came in a week ago because after I announced you, was from Drewish, and he asked, "So preheat, do we drop Arcane now in prep for midnight, or do we stick it out in hopes that they fix the awkwardness?" So I assume they haven't fixed the awkwardness.
At the risk of making this more of a mage podcast, so let me talk about Arcane a little bit. Sure. Everything that you know about Arcane and the reasons why it's been good and so dominant in Prog for the last 5-6 tiers, all that's gone. Arcane right now has really good funnel damage. It's got the execute damage. Its cooldowns line up really well with the fight mechanics. A lot of them demand damage checks during shields, right? And you have like increased damage amounts during those times. Everything about it just kind of fits really well with the current design in the War Within and just like how these raid encounters play out. Also a lot of forced downtime in especially the higher end encounters. And it's just a really perfect fit. All that's gone. Arcane doesn't have the highest burst anymore. It has no execute. It basically has no funnel. Its cooldown timing is back to being like a 1 minute 30, 3 minute. And so, yeah, I would say if you're a diehard Arcane fan, like it's probably fine to play it. It'll probably be, just like any spec in the game. They do okay tuning with it, right? As long as you aren't pushing cutting edge. But if you're not, then you probably aren't forced to play it, which is probably a good thing, right? We can maybe get some variety in there when it comes to those prog kills.
I've never been a mage, guys, so this is all way over my head. I can barely play BM Hunter, all right? Mage is just, it's too much. Preheat, we talked about the UI, we talked about classes and so on and so forth, but whether you want to talk about that stuff again or something else, what still feels like it's definitely in flux and being worked on right now on beta?
The biggest question mark is where the UI decisions are going to land, because every week we're getting kind of a new lore drop on what's allowed and what isn't. And it's very important, the devil's in the details here, knowing exactly what is allowed and what isn't, because it's always going to be this insane cat and mouse game. Every little bit that Blizzard gives is going to cause a whole ripple effect of now you have this combat add-on back, right? They add this one hook in. Okay, now you can track, this in the fight. It's always going to be a big, I guess, like their decisions that they make about the UI specifically, especially when it comes to visibility on stuff that isn't class specific, the stuff that's like encounter specific. They have to be really mindful of any change that they make there, because they always risk bringing back combat add-ons in a big way. So I think that's the biggest question, is where we're going to end up there. Aside from that, we also have class design, which is always a work in progress, even leading up to the first patch. In the 0.1 patch, usually there's a pretty big overhaul for a couple specs. So I think a lot of specs are going to see a lot of change there. It'll probably just be whoever complains the most or whoever gets the most love. It'll probably be Mage, because Mage just always gets a lot of love for some reason.
It's those plus the worst performing Mage spec. That's always that always gets reworked as well.
Yeah, and the Shadow rework, we got to get another Shadow Priest rework in there, of course. Yeah, that's always,
we got two of those slated for midnight.
You're right, of course. So I mean, that's obviously the biggest thing that's in flux. But I'd say overall, things feel very solidified. Like I think people should expect, if they log on to beta and they play the game right now, that is probably going to be how it feels whenever they log in, whenever the expansion actually releases.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair and appropriate take. Tactics, what do you feel like might ship good enough rather than truly finished within the next month or two? And what has you worried in that sense?
I mean, I think it's basically what looks decent now compared to the other like UI stuff like we're talking about. So I think it might be the cooldown manager, right? Like it's in a decent spot. It's usable. In fact, I'm using it over some of the add-ons that kind of edit it right now, but the functionality isn't like quite there. There's still like some key things. Like for example, it definitely should have been designed similar to action bars, in my opinion, where you can kind of add as many bars as you want. Right now, you're set until what I think like 4 categories that Blizzard gives you, and that's it, right? You can't separate those bars further in any way, and it's very restrictive. I personally would like at least like 2 more bars. I know people are like, yeah, I want like 4 more bars. So that's one thing which I doubt is going to be available for launch. The other thing is it has like a lack of dynamic like buff centering and stuff like that. Basically, the buffs, how they work is you put them in static spots and they stay there. When that buff pops up, it pops up in that specific spot of your screen. So it doesn't like center dynamically. So it's a bit odd, and that's something I would like to see as well. But it's fairly in a fairly decent state. So I'm not sure how many resources are actually going to be dedicated to pushing it all the way there, right?
Yeah. Let me follow up that question with another question. Believe it or not, you say you'd like for it to kind of feel and perform like an action bar. What if, hear me out, what if it feels and acts and behaves and performs like weak auras? What if we just have the cooldown manager be weak auras in that sense, where we can just add and adjust and do that? What do you think?
I mean,
is that too far?
It's kind of there. I mean, like, right, you edit it in, or you use edit mode to kind of reposition them or whatever. It's too static in what it's providing you currently. There's no way to customize it in like the number of bars, right? The number of bars, the positioning of things within said bars, which weak auras gives you, and this doesn't. It's very close. Like I said, with those changes, it's essentially weak auras for the UI portion, right? It's just not quite there.
Yeah, I'm gonna show my age here, but anyone remember an add-on called Tell Me When?
Oh yeah,
it's before weak auras. I feel like that was the perfect solution to what the cooldown manager should be. You drag and drop it from your spellbook, whatever it is that you're looking to track, and then you can, manipulate how it displays that information. Doesn't have to be too crazy. You can't make like a car UI where you have a steering wheel and everything like that, right? So we've dodged that bullet. But just being able to choose what I want to track from my spellbook, I feel like that is appropriate. If it's in my spellbook, I should be able to track that, right? But for some reason, a lot of the spells that are in there just don't translate over, which doesn't really make sense.
Dratnos, does Midnight feel confident in what it wants to be, or do you think that Blizzard's being a bit cautious about not upsetting the balance in some specific way?
I mean, I think the add-on change definitely is. That's not something you do if you didn't want to shake the boat, right? They're doing a big swing with that at least. I think the rest of it, I don't know. I mean, the story is moving in a interesting direction, although obviously that we just know the start of the expansion story, not the end. Are there other major core features coming? Not really, right? Like other than that, it's kind of a, I guess housing is the big one, but that's kind of already
system,
in.
All right, let's show some respect to the prey system.
Yeah,
please.
Prey does. I'm a little bit curious about that one because it seems like the version on beta right now is not super fun, but I have to be careful because it felt like delves were that way for a lot of super high-end players on the War Within beta, and it turns out that version was just really fun for a lot of the people that it's aimed at. So maybe Prey will be similar, but I've seen some complaints from people who like delves that the current Prey system is undercooked. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm curious how that one lands, but I admit I haven't tested it basically at all.
Yeah.
How much praying have you done?
Yeah, 0.
0 praying?
I've just read posts about it, so
I pray every day. All right.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
No, but I do agree. It feels like a world quest. Prey is just like one extra world quest that you do across the whole zone right now, and I mean that's fine.
Yeah, right? I mean, I liked world quests. I kind of miss them actually. I kind of miss the doing Legion remix and that feeling when you get your emissaries and you like overlap a warden's emissary with a zone emissary, and you're like doing a world quest that's satisfying both, and it's also like a fly and kill one guy quest. You're like, yeah, this is
love those.
This is scratching some good dopamine that modern WoW kind of doesn't. So, but the thing about that is that like it gives relevant rewards. It did in Legion and it does in remix as well. And I don't know if Prey will.
Yeah, I haven't done anything related to the Prey system. I don't know if I will. Delves are fine. Mythic Plus is great. Rating's great. All that fun stuff. But not sure in the Prey system. But whatever. It's fine. It's fine. Preheat. If a player logs in on launch day and they expect a fully dialed in experience, where are they most likely to be pleasantly surprised, and where might they be a bit disappointed?
I think it's kind of the same as most expansions. You log in, the leveling experience is always a bit rocky just due to the sheer amount of players, but it is solid, right? When it comes to MMOs in general, it's a solid leveling experience. And dungeons, always solid when it comes to the content until you get to the super high end, obviously the like top 1% kind of things. The tuning gets a little weird in some places and we'll have complaints there, but they'll adjust those, I'm sure. And then the raiding content is always pretty solid too. So I think like those are the big three. I think where you'll find that things are a bit lacking, it's probably going to be the shock of moving from how the game is now to how the game is without add-ons. If you haven't logged into the beta and you haven't experienced it and you are used to your tools and you've loved them for years and years, you're probably going to be pretty surprised to see how things are different. You can find other tools that pretty much do most of the things that you are used to right now. But it's going to be a different name and you're going to have to go track it down and figure it out, right? So it's definitely going to be a bit awkward for the first couple hours there. But I'd say overall, just the experience of the game and how things feel. Class design, if you log into a new character, like a new alt, you're going to have that same feeling of, oh, things are different. I get to, figure this new one out, right? And that's always fun. And as someone who likes to play a lot of alts, I will say it does get it's a bit much with the current design, like having to know all of the things to know and kind of go down every different rabbit hole to figure out how to optimize for your spec. If you are someone who does that, it takes a lot of time and effort. And you're going to find that in Midnight, as you log into your new characters, your alts, that it is much easier to grasp just the basics, right? Just to get the character moving, killing mobs, leveling up, you're going to not feel as overwhelmed. And I think that's something that is off-putting for people if they log into a new alt and they see how much has changed since they play their alt and they're like, oh my God, there's too many buttons. I'm just going to log out, make a ret paladin or something, right? Instead, I think that those people are going to log in and they're going to feel a breath of fresh air from that. I know I did on a lot of my alts, right? And I do like the complexity. I still felt that way. So I think that that is where the expansion is going to kind of shine, is the initial getting a character set up, going through the content, enjoying the content at just like a very baseline level. I think it's very solid in that area.
That was a beautiful segue because we're going to move on to our next topic about class design and pruning and getting on these characters that we like playing and whatnot. Tactics, Blizzard has made it very clear, of course, that Midnight is about tightening the class kits and reinforcing identity. And on paper, that's great. Much like what Preheat was just saying, good, bad, otherwise. In practice, how is it landing with those class kits and reinforcing things and pruning and whatnot?
So just caveat, my perspective is basically entirely from the tank specs.
That's totally fine. That's why you're here, baby.
Anything else? Yeah.
That's why you're here.
So,
it's all good.
I think generally positive. Like they have reduced the ceiling a bit on some of the specs. Some of them, like Guardian, I think is like a bit more complex now, I would say.
It was hard for it to become less.
Yeah. Iron fur. Yeah. But for the floor, it's definitely gone up. Like a spec like Brewmaster, for example, is a lot easier to pick up now than it was before. Does it have the same level of complexity? No. And there are a lot of people kind of complaining about that aspect. But I think it's not like it's like baby's first tank, right? Like there's still complexity there. There's still room for mastery. And I think generally just across the board for tanks, they've had more positive changes than negative, I would say.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Good. No. You, I insist.
No. I said from the beginning,
okay.
This is you, baby, not me.
Yeah. So having played, I think the tanks are already less about playing the class and more about playing the sort of encounter, right? The situation they're in compared to a DPS player, right? Like a tank hitting a training dummy is always kind of, relatively easy. There have been a few little things. So like Prot Warrior had this interaction called Violent Outburst, right? Where when you spend enough rage, your next Thunderclap or Shield Slam gets empowered. And it was like pretty important to do good damage that you landed that on a Shield Slam, unless you were playing Thane, and in which case sometimes the Thunderclap was better, but usually it was like you really want to make sure that you press a Shield Slam and not a Thunderclap after that happens. And those sorts of little optimizations are largely gone in Midnight, but otherwise I would say tanks feel pretty similar to how they did in War Within. Like I think the DPS and healers are going to feel much more pruned than the tank specs did. I think the tank specs are feeling about the same.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from, I mean, literally anyone who's been maining tanks is that, by and large, mostly untouched, or if not untouched, then similar to how they play right now. Dratnos, does this pruning that we're talking about, does it feel intentional, whether for tanks, healers, DPS, whatever, or does it feel a bit reactive to what players have been saying or doing for the last expansion or two?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely done deliberately, right? Like, it's partly something that accompanies the add-on change and is sort of a necessary part of a game with less, add-on interaction. And I think also it is just a response to one of the more popular complaints about WoW, right? Like, I feel like this expansion, the add-on thing, led from this as well, where Blizzard basically looked at it and they were like, okay, what are the things that turn people off from playing WoW, right? What are things in the first 10 hours of gameplay that you run into and then you're like, oh, this is kind of stupid? Or maybe not the first 10 hours even, but like when you look at the game on a Twitch stream even, or your friend is trying to get you to play. And like, I think that the complexity of the specs, the button bloat of things like Brewmaster is a good example of one that, was super bloated. I think those are definitely things that they were targeting with this whole thing.
Yeah, I had a series where I leveled with my sister. This is back in, God, this is like 10 years ago. And even then, she got so confused with like, okay, wait, I have like 15 abilities. What do I use? And it just, yeah, someone getting in from the ground up it's tough for him. I mean, this game's pretty old at this point in time, and it's changed a lot over the years. I'm a big fan of simplifying things in that sense. And speaking of that preheat, are classes becoming simpler or just clearer? And if simpler is the answer, is that a bad thing? You're muted. Hate to see it. Call it. That's it. We're out of here, people.
There we go.
Messed
We're
it
back.
up. We're starting from the beginning, all right?
Yeah, yeah.
Kidding,
All right,
buddy.
from the
Take it
top. Yeah, so it is a case by case basis, right? Most specs are definitely simpler. I'd say over across the board, every spec is simpler, but there are little things that you'll notice that, are a bit weird, where it's like Dratnos said, one ability modifies two other abilities. Whenever you press it, you really want to press one of them. You don't want to press the other one. They've, for the most part, removed most of the cases where this is happening. And I think that they'll continue to improve that over time. Little things, right? Like here's a cooldown where if you press it at the wrong time, your damage is completely down the bin. Of course, there's going to be some skill expression still, right? You need to know when to press your button. But I think they've done a pretty good job. And I'd say that, it is definitely moving in the right direction for the game as a whole. If they want to add complexity back in, they have to take away something, right? Because we were at critical mass in the War Within. I mean, you can't really add more complexity on top of that, or else you're going to have to start giving out PhDs for every spec. So it is solid, yeah. I'd say overall, things are simpler. They are clearer. It's a good thing. Some of that maybe needs to be moved towards the more complex direction for certain specs. But we'll see that happen over time. And I think they already are showing that they're aware of the specs. They're like very, or I guess the outliers, you could say, right? The specs that have too much simplicity.
Yeah. So I'd like to introduce you to Pack Leader BM Hunter. Okay. I'm not sure if PhD is quite necessary for that spec, but that's why I like it. I like the simplicity. But yeah,
BM is a great example because right now, if you talk about Dark Ranger, the way it plays is so unintuitive because you don't want to be pressing a button every GCD. There are times when you need to hold so that you can press your black arrow in 0.2, 0.3 GCDs whenever it comes up. And if you get GCD locked by a different spell, which in every case in this game, it's like you want to be pressing buttons every global, right? To do damage. This is the exception. You need to just hold on your GCD so that you can press your black arrow button again, right? That's a great example of how things can be simple but not intuitive, right? And I think that is something that we have to be like mindful of, especially in these changes, because that can still happen even with simplicity. That sort of bad design is always kind of like in the background. So it's going to come down to specific tuning on talents, and it's going to come down to the tier bonuses and the changes that they make overall. But there are less examples of these in Midnight. That is true.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is like Blizzard are clearly being really cognizant when you look at the design of when there are like weird gameplay patterns that you'll read the guide for your spec and be like, oh man, I'm supposed to do this, right? Like I'm supposed to hold this for this, and like that doesn't seem right, but it is. And those are, I think, what's really under fire, and it's kind of invisible, but those are definitely the main targets of a lot of this.
Tactics, which specializations, again, speaking from the tank side of things, obviously for you, which of them do you feel like are generally benefiting from this direction? Because tanks aren't really changing that much, like we've established.
I mean, I can cheat and talk about Guardian because that one, like I said, is not getting simpler. That one's actually getting a little bit more complex.
Oh,
Like
okay.
before, particularly in Mythic Plus, right? You're in the situation where right now you just spam Iron Fur. Like you don't even spec into Raise, which is your only AoE spender. So you just press Iron Fur, and they're getting rid of that gameplay and they're pushing you towards playing Raise. Raise is in a much easier spot. You don't do damage when you Iron Fur anymore. And so I think that's healthier for the spec and also just more fun. It is a bit more complexity, but it's, you know, it's more fun in my opinion. I've always preferred the Raise based builds versus the Iron Fur builds. In terms of a spec that's actually been pruned back a little bit, and I think is an improvement. I think one thing, I'm gonna be careful here because people might get mad, but like I'm gonna talk about Prop Paladin for a bit. I absolutely hated the whole like maintaining these micro buffs at all times, like the spell block buffs and all those stuff in like Mythic Plus. Not really a thing you didn't raid, but in Mythic Plus, it was kind of annoying, especially the like there was like a 6-second buff attached to your Word of Glory. Like that was just like annoying to maintain. It was not fun, and I am very, very glad to see that be pruned.
Yeah, I think Prop Pally and VDH are two examples where like understanding what makes you tanky on those specs and like what are the conditions under which you're going to be surviving a lot of damage versus when you're actually paper. It's like it's pretty counterintuitive, right? Because if you read through the spellbook on Prop Pally, you'd think, okay, Shield of the Righteous, that's got to be it, right? I press Shield of the Righteous and like I'm tanky, and the answer is no, you are not. Like you need to be in consecration, you need to have Word of Glory in the last 6 seconds, and you need to have your Shield of the Righteous up, and failing those things, you are actually quite squishy. And that same with VDH, right? Like a whole lot of VDH's defensiveness is like, how many souls have you cycled through in the last 8 seconds, right? How long have you been setting this up? And that is another, I think, great area for them to prune back a little bit, even though those specs were really fun for, like, I think VDH, there were a lot of people who really liked developing that mastery once they got good at it. It was, I think, extremely prohibitive to like new players approaching the spec.
Yeah, I was one of those new players. Just like last week, I was playing my Demon Hunter, and I decided, oh, you know what? I'm gonna just go into a 15 Alcatar Academy and just try and tank it solo, and just do that first big pull and see if I can survive it. Just doing reps on it over and over and over again, trying to figure out like what is it that makes me not die instantly on this pull, right? And it felt like it was a lot more clear, right? And even on the tooltips, stuff like your I don't know the name of the ability, but the brand that you put out, where you that enemy does less damage to you. Now it's like you just take less damage from everything. So that like that clicks for you. And then obviously like the amount of soul spending, it used to just like have an infinite, I guess, amount, or maybe not infinite, but it used to go up quite a bit. And now it's kind of like a set number. And I was able to actually kind of figure it out and get it to where at least I could stay alive for, 30 seconds, 45 seconds before I died on that pulse. So yeah, I think as someone who's just like coming in, trying to figure it out fresh, it did make a lot more sense.
I mean, I think that's kind of the point too. You guys are bringing up a lot of good examples and whatnot, to where not to speak for Blizzard, but I'm sure this is exactly the point they're trying to make, is they want people to be able to jump in and understand things a bit more intuitively, and just be able to meet and accomplish their goals. And so I think if that is the case, great. Personally speaking, selfishly, I don't want to lose things like weak auras, but I'm all in favor of the game being more fun and understandable and digestible and whatnot. Dratnos, which of these specializations, or which specializations that you've experimented with, has anything been lost in translations, or something important that's been lost in regards to how they play and whatnot?
I would say of the tank specs, I don't know, they all feel, I think, like their soul has been preserved. I think, like, looking at, say, Resto Shaman, that one was definitely an offender on that category, and I think maybe still is, even after the getting a little bit better. But I think that one's still a lot of the healers definitely lost, I would say, more complexity than the DPS, than the tanks, and I think that is. I mean, it's to some extent it's understandable. Like people talk about WoW being an easy game, but it's very much not actually easy to be good at WoW, given like there's so much that you're tracking that's not just your character. So people look at the core rotations getting simpler, and they're like, "This was already quite simple. How is this? How is this getting simpler?" But I think that it makes a lot of sense given how hard it is to actually be good at WoW, given how hard the encounters are, especially with less weak auras and stuff like that. So I don't know. I guess core answer. Specs that are a lot worse off. Maybe Dev Evoker as well is another one where it's like this is it's like current Dev Evoker but a little bit more soulless, and Resto Shaman. Those would be at the top of my list, I think, of ones to cook on further.
Preheat
maybe Arcane as well to throw one for Preheat.
Evoker and make good lord, man. Preheat. Would you agree?
What do you feel
with
about Dev?
takes?
Am I right on Dev Evoker? Is Dev Evoker one that you'd put on that list?
So Dev is 100% soulless right now. I agree. It's essentially the same rotation as it was, and it's kind of weird because like aside from like little things from your tier bonus, Dev Evoker as it was without the tier bonus was simple enough to be a midnight spec, right? You press your empowers on cooldown, you spin the thing, you build the thing. There's not much else to that, right? And you had this button that you could press that added some complexity. They removed it, engulf, right? So now you don't pop your fire breath anymore. It just happens automatically. It's very strong. I mean, and they've made like changes that feel nice, like the hover change. You can hover while you're casting, which was
that's so nice.
You had to do that during the GCD before. You had to hover weave, right, to be optimal. Now you can just press it, and that's fantastic, right? But the issue is that the gameplay itself, even though you're like looking at the damage meters and you're like, wow, I'm owning, and I always have damage up, and my Dragon Rage lasts forever, and like I just feel so powerful. But also, it just kind of feels hollow. You don't really feel like you're that engaged with it, and there just needs to be something else to the rotation that keeps you involved. Arcane, I think, has like the opposite problem. There's just so many different directions that you can take it. If you look at the talents, of course, there's only going to be like one or two that are really the things that you'll play, right? Once we look more into the Sims, but it feels like the reward of like building and spending just isn't there. They didn't like nail that part of it, so it ends up just kind of feeling like all your buttons do the same thing, and you're kind of just pressing whichever one you're supposed to press in that moment. You never get that big dopamine hit of like I just had a giant arcane barrage like you do on live, right? So little cooking is required for both of those specs, 100%.
Kind of in that same line of thinking, Preheat, is there one class or design decision that if it doesn't change before launch that you're worried about?
One design decision. Let's see. I mean, it's hard to put my finger on exactly one. But there's
that many,
I mean, of course, you're always going to be a little unhappy with the specs you play whenever you're transitioning from such an amazing spec like Arcane on Live to what it is in the next expansion. The bar is set so high for Arcane that it's just going to feel a little disappointing no matter what. But that being said, it just really needs to feel like you're getting, like I was saying, like something back whenever you spend, right? If I have all of these buffs and I have 25 salvo and I have 4 arcane charges and I do a barrage, which is like, you just read the tooltips, these are the things that are supposed to make you do the big damage, right? I need to feel like I get something back from that, right? I see the number pop up and my brain is happy. Same goes for Dev. I think they've kind of nailed it with Frost and Fire. Those are great. I wouldn't say that there's like one specific issue. It's more just like there's an overall roughness to some of the design. It just seems like a bit of them need a bit more cooking.
I know we've talked about the UI and whatnot a little bit already during the show, but I do want to talk about it a little bit more. And we know that Midnight is Blizzard's just biggest step toward baking add-on functionality directly into the game. They've done it a few times in the past with a variety of things. Tactics, from a player perspective, do you find all of these changes and everything that's coming or leaving, is that empowering, or do you think it's going to be a bit limiting, especially early on?
I mean, yeah, for sure. Initially, it's going to be a bit limiting, but I don't think the limitations they want to impose are necessarily a bad thing. Right? There's lots of things that I'm sure everyone here would agree with. probably should be limited, right? The power of weak auras in combat, right? There are certain things like tracking cooldowns on nameplates, which Blizzard has decided, we don't want you to be able to do that. Maybe that was a little bit too strong. I think the problem here is that, at least in the short term, it seems like they maybe jumped the gun a bit, right? I don't know if anyone is really expecting them initially to roll out the add-on apocalypse or whatever in midnight before they announced it, right? I think personally I was expecting them to kind of slowly implement these things and iterate off them and then maybe do that in the last Titan. And now we're seeing them try to push that for midnight, and then we're seeing them have to peel back on certain things that they're not going to be able to have functional for the expansion. And that means, like we've been talking about, add-ons are kind of creeping back in. And now, instead of just having a few different add-ons, you have to get like 6 or 7 different things to actually be able to cover what you were missing.
So
Yeah.
See, I
Go
think that's probably going to get better though, right? Because we're just in the infancy of this new system. I think as time goes on, we will have like an LVUI kind of thing that just comes in and fixes all the little issues all in one package. I think a lot of the reason why it feels this way is just it's so rough and early, and it's like one guy has this one thing that fixes this one issue, and then this other guy worked on this one little passion project that fixes this other thing. So it's a little sporadic right now, but I definitely agree with the overall take that like it does feel like we have to go and search for more little things.
Yeah, I think there's a category of things where it's like, this is going to take a little bit of time. And that I'm not too worried about a lot of those where it's like, some of this stuff. And I think that's where people make the argument where it's like, Blizzard really should have done that first and then killed the add-ons. But from Blizzard's perspective, like I think you basically have to do it on a major expansion. You can't do it in a patch, right? So if they're not doing it in 12.0, they have to delay it all the way till 13.0. So I can see why they'd want to pull the trigger on it soon. Something that worries me a little bit more though is there are some areas where it seems like the philosophy is kind of lost some of that internal consistency. Like it's no longer all obvious what they're trying to, or they're successfully trying to accomplish the things they set out to accomplish. I would highlight the soul fragments and the maelstrom weapon change as an area where it's like that kind of goes against the initial philosophy of restricting our ability to see our players, resources and stuff. And there they need to kind of decide which direction they want to go, rather than us ending in a kind of worst of both worlds situation. Another one is coloring enemy nameplates. So coloring enemy nameplates was initially functionality that they took away. And then somebody came up with like a hack to basically be like, oh, well, if the enemy is level 72 and they have a mana bar, it's probably a caster, or level 70 and it has a mana bar, they're probably a caster. They're level 71, it's a lieutenant probably. If it's level 72, right? Like it's a boss probably, right? And they have those sort of little workarounds. And then it's like, oh, if it has an interruptible cast, well, we can't tell if it has an interruptible cast, but if you run this script and then they start casting an interruptible cast, then we know that it has an interruptible cast, and we can recolor dynamically the nameplate after it does that. And it's like, okay, do we want to get rid of this add-on, or do we want to allow it? Either of those are fine, but if we move to a world where it's like scuffed allowed, I feel like that's just worse than making either of the other decisions, right? Like, Do we want to let people freely recolor nameplates, or do we want them all to be the same color and you have to tell whether a mob is a caster based on whether it's casting and what it looks like in its animations or stuff? Because if we're going to move to a world where instead we all have these nameplates that like recolor once a mob starts casting, again, it just kind of brings me back to like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and it really seemed like they wanted to go to that world where you just have to see the mob as cast.
Yeah.
Because in their initial interviews, they were like, hey, we're going to reduce the number of cast bars. So when you see a cast bar, it's important. And then it was really surprising to me to see their response to the coloring of nameplates be like, we'll leave it, maybe.
Yeah, this is fine. Like, really? Is this fine? Like, why did we do any of this then? Couldn't we have just kept it the way it was?
Yeah, and couldn't coloring the nameplates just be like a part of the default UI? I feel like that's actually such a nice thing.
And if it was base UI, like that would be great. If you let the add-ons do it, it's less great, but it's less work for Blizzard, so I could understand that. But like, this is just, it seems so much worse than doing either of those things again.
Dranos, who do you think benefits the most from this new UI direction? I mean, we're talking about all this stuff like scripting and workarounds and is this allowed, isn't that allowed? But like, baseline, who's going to benefit from this?
I think if you're, so there will be people that are like, probably there are some add-on devs that I think were pretty demoralized by it, and then there are some that I think are having a pretty good time, breaking and circumventing all of the things that Blizzard was initially saying they're going to do. So I think this first tier, we're going to see some set of those people having a good time. Where I think those people are going to derive a lot of joy from the Twitch chat reaction when they show off on stream all this functionality that Blizzard said was going away. So that's going to be one group of winners. But I think the main group of winners is just going to be like, I don't know, if you're just good at WoW, you're probably safe regardless, right?
Like, what about people who aren't good at WoW? And that's not to
Yeah. So I mean, it depends. Like, part of being good at WoW in the past was downloading and understanding the correct set of like weak ores and add-ons. So if you were good at everything except for that, then this is really good for you. I don't actually know. At most, I know one person in my guild who was like that, who was like just the add-ons and stuff were like, he was actually good at his character, but he was generationally bad at, having the add-on correctly installed and configured and stuff. But for most people, those are pretty linked traits. Like, you don't just play WoW at a high level without being capable of downloading weak ores and stuff. That's, usually you gotta learn. There are very few people that are like that, but they are definitely winners of this.
It's the guilds that just got to Fractalus for the first time, and now they don't have to set up an add-on to do the boss. That's who it benefits.
Dude, we got to see what the pre-patch changes to Fractals. I bet they're going to completely gut that boss in the pre-patch.
Yeah, it's going to be like Heroic, where you just take it to the sides.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to feel constrained by these changes? Who's... I guess there's no real other follow-up to that question, but who's going to feel constrained by it?
It's all about necessity, right? It's the people who need those features to do their job. So it's going to be healers who need to know certain aspects of the healing frames that aren't available to them, right? It's going to be the folks who need to dot certain mobs and don't have the visibility to know which ones are dotted and which ones aren't, with like a reasonable amount of space taken, and like the nameplate's not just like playing the little barrel game on your screen flying around, right? It's going to be those groups that are pushing in Mythic Plus, and they need to get out certain stops and manage the mobs, and they don't have the tools, at least at the start of the pull, right? Like we're talking about, there's a lot of things, workarounds that work like as the pull is progressed, where you can have the organization and be able to see the things you need to see. But for the most part, the experience for me, just personally, has been you go into a pull and it feels like the damage just kind of happens. Like you aren't really sure like how to deal with it. It kind of going, I'll segue here, but like, okay, whenever you're limit testing in Mythic Plus, right, and you're doing like a pull and you're trying to see if you can manage this crazy thing that you're trying to do, right? Right now, it feels like whenever you get that going, you see things kind of going out of control. You can see it moving in the wrong direction, and like where the problem is, but like you can't stop it, right? It's like your stops are uncoordinated. Like you see the cast going off, you can't do anything about it. Like people are even commenting like, oh, kick that guy or stop this guy, and like it doesn't happen, and then you wipe, right? That's how it feels right now. It's like you feel like you lose control. How it feels in Midnight is more like you aren't really sure what's happening. It's just things are kind of happening, and you aren't sure how to deal with it or what even is happening in the first place. You have to like dig through the logs to figure out like what the problem is. The visibility is somehow worse because you intuitively you don't see the same things you see in the moment. So it's going to be those groups that need that control. Those are going to be the people who are going to feel the most constrained by the add-on changes.
Yeah, I'm reminded a bit of like Path of Exile is another game that I play a lot, and a big part of the difficulty of that game is just like understanding what can kill you and what monsters do damage and what type of damage it is and like what you can do to avoid it. And the game is very not clear about it, right? It's like, oh, well,
very cryptic.
Yeah, it's like this mob does this, and like that is what you have to worry about in this area, is something that the game basically only gives you that feedback in the form of killing you. And if you try and learn it by that process, like you have to really intentionally be trying to learn and be really smart and play for a long time, or you have to like watch the streamers that know what's going on, go to the content creators that understand and can tell you, read about it, right? And like intentionally learn about it that way. And I think WoW's moving in a little bit of that direction. So another category of winners, I think, is people who like develop an encyclopedic knowledge of the game and then are able to share that, which It's good. That's probably good news for the content creator ecosystem, because I think compared to, the expansions where the death recap and add-ons were a little bit more powerful and available, it's going to be a good time to be somebody who like actually understands which mob in that pack kills you and is important, because that's going to be less clear to the player, which I think that's like an L, and Blizzard should fix that as soon as they can with this, because that seems completely counter to the like stated goals of this, and what they're successfully accomplishing with, say, the classes getting simpler, but dungeons, for instance, knowing what killed you in a pack should not be as hard as it is on Midnight right now.
Don't worry.
Yeah, if they aim with simplicity, it seems like kind of the opposite. If it's like people like THD can really decode what's happening, right? What the problem is. And going back to the UI question from before, like who benefits the most, it's people like that. Like people who just figure it out, like, oh, this is the problem and here's how we get the solution. The people who are used to like relying on tools and like analyzing stuff to figure it out, they're gonna have so much less to work with, stuff to work with. So they're gonna have to really sharpen those tools to figure it out.
Tactics, do you think that reducing add-on reliance is actually going to make the game more accessible, or is it just moving complexity somewhere else?
I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what you mean by accessible, right? Because, like we're saying, right, there's a lot of things that are kind of harder to figure out. Like, if you're dying to something, the in-game death recap, I feel like for years it's just been wildly inaccurate, right? And that is something they've stated as we want to put this into the damage meters. I believe that's something they're planning on putting in. But with how janky, I guess, the in-game death recap has been for years, how much can we trust that death recap, right? Once it's put into the damage meter, and people before used details, it was fairly accurate, still had some issues, but now what's going to happen for all three of us, someone's going to open up the live log and we're going to go look at what happened. For your average player, they're probably not logging, let alone live logging, and they're just going to be like, I don't know what I died to here, right? How what's going on? So
yeah, one heal.
Yeah, then somebody in your pug is going to be like, noob, you died to this, and they're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the situation of like it's much less accessible than it is right now with an add-on like details that is so prevalent, right? So it's very hit and miss. The other thing is like a guild like Undaunted, right? They rely on weak auras to communicate in game. And I know I think they had some communication with Blizzard at some point. I don't know what came from that, but they're a group of people that is certainly partially punished by these changes.
Now, of course, conversely, would you say that it is becoming, the game as a whole is becoming more accessible for people who are getting into the game or leveling up and just reaching in game? Because as we've already established, you don't need weak auras and all these specific weak auras, and you don't need DB and big wigs anymore, and so on and so forth.
Maybe at a base level, I could see it. I could see an argument for it, especially because like WoW does kind of have a new player problem, right? Like a lot of the WoW population is aging, and there's not a lot of new blood, as it were, kind of coming into the game. I'm sure, like, if you look at the people below the age of like 25 in all three of our guilds, it's probably like less than 5 people. So it's probably good that there are some baseline changes. It looks more modern, etc. It might help bring some people in, but I feel like there are areas like we were touching on that are probably more negative than positive at the moment.
Yeah, I would categorize it as like, when you use the word accessible, like it's definitely, accessibility is it's going to be a victim here. If you're somebody who is got hard of hearing, deaf, any sort of accessibility problem, like this is going to be, you're going to be losing tools that helped you. And Blizzard are trying to minimize that, but it's kind of unavoidable with what they're trying to do with the add-ons. But in terms of becoming a more approachable game to just like a generic new player, I do think that this will do that. Like this should make the process of trying to convince your friend to play WoW a little bit less hard. Yeah.
That was a good distinction between accessible and approachable. I need to have you write these show notes, these outlines, man. Jeez. Dratnos, for top tier players, does all of these changes we've been talking about, does this lift the baseline without capping peak performance, or does it just narrow the entire range for top tier players?
Yeah, so I think, in some cases it sort of depends a little bit on the spec you're playing. I think the specs becoming, for the highest end players, I think a few of the specs are definitely going to be getting to a point where like playing them at close to 100% is going to be actually kind of within the realm of possibility, which wasn't really true before. Again, people talk about WoW being an easy game or whatever, but that's wrong. And especially playing like Mythic Dimensius and not making rotational errors is like almost impossible, right? And I think that's going to be a little bit less true. So a lot is going to depend on how are the fights designed and how are the fights difficult and interesting to play, because for very good players, they might actually be starting to approach the skill ceiling of these specs in a way that previously we weren't.
Preheat, would you agree with everything that Dragonflight just said there in regards to like either narrowing that entire range, or is it just is everything uncapped at this point in time?
Again, it's like a spec by spec kind of basis, but there are certainly specs that you can play for 5 minutes, and if you're pretty good at World of Warcraft, you can just play without any errors. And then all that really, I guess the final frontier of optimization is movement, right? So if your spec deals with movement well, then congratulations, you have it downloaded 100%. And if your spec has some struggles with movement, maybe there's some areas that you need to improve, right? But you're pushing 90, 95%. And it is much easier to get to that point, right? It's not going to take hours of practice for most players. I think even the average player is probably going to pick it up and be at least at above what you would get from the highlighted assist, right? Like just doing it manually. So maybe that's a win, right? That could certainly be said as a win. But also for the players who like the game being complex, I think there's an important distinction here between like complexity and like what it is that brings new players in. Like you hear this argument a lot where they say it needs to be simple because we need new players. What about a game like League of Legends? That game isn't that simple, but there's a lot of people picking up that game. There's a lot of people playing Path of Exile 2. Would you call that game simple, right? It's more simple than PoE 1, but my point is that a game can still approach and attract new players with some complexity, right? It doesn't have to be simple for there to be an interest in it. What you need to avoid is like the overstimulation, right? Where you log in and you're like, oh, there's just too much happening here. Like I'm out. So it's a fine line, right? You have to find that line, but I think it is good to have a bit of complexity just to keep those players, once they have reached that 95% or 100% of their mastery of the spec, they need to be engaged in some way, or else they're just going to get bored and they're going to stop playing.
So Preheat, last question for this topic real quick. If Blizzard doesn't iterate meaningfully on the UI before launch, which is right around the corner, what do you think the biggest pain point for players will be? Like, what are they going to feel immediately when they start playing Midnight or the pre-patch?
So the biggest pain point is going to be if your resource isn't tracked well within the default UI. And there are some specs where you'll have a button that you can use at certain points, but it just may not work the way you think it will, right? It just doesn't feel right. I guess the best example of this is like Devourer Demon Hunter with Collapsing Star, and like issues where like if you start your Collapsing Star, which is your spender, right? This is like your big Spirit Bomb ability. Like canceling it, like just like gets rid of your resource. Also, the resource is showing up on your bar, and it's also like these little orbs on the ground. You do have a debuff that shows the amount, and they're now like they're restricting or like limiting the restriction on it so that you can see that with the weak aura, right? But if you don't have that weak aura and you're just kind of going into it, just like picking it up, trying it new, it might be a little confusing at first to figure out how that works. And until you download the weak aura or add-on to approach this, it'll probably be a bit challenging for you too. So I think those are going to be the people who have the most trouble with it.
Do you think Blizzard's going to fix that before launch?
I think players will fix it. I think add-on authors will fix it. I think as long as Blizzard allows these things, even though it goes against their design philosophy, I think if they allow players to step in and fix their UI, I think it'll be good. That's how it's been for the last couple decades, right? This game's UI has never been good. No one says they play World of Warcraft because the default UI is so sick and they just love it, right? It's the fact that you can customize it and you can make the game you can make it fit for you, right? It's like fully customizable. And sure, there are people who like, live and die by the default UI, especially PvPers who are used to having to do that for a tournament kind of situation, right? Where they get used to that. But I think ultimately it is on the player to make the UI work for them, and it's on Blizzard to allow that to be adjusted.
We're gonna shift gears here. We're gonna talk about raiding and dungeons and whatnot. We actually have 2 viewer questions that have come in that work well for this topic here. And Dratnos, first question is for you, buddy. This is from Kaladin. Are you going to be doing 18s on all of your rats after they announced the big 18 thing last week?
I don't think so. I think rat keys are probably, the ceiling has probably gone up to 12 because that's like a little better rewards than the 10. But I don't know about going up to 15 or 18 at least early season. Then
Dude, yeah,
by the time it's easy, that'll probably be past the burnout horizon of the season.
Tactics question for you. I'm going to send your way. How hard do you think Dimensius will be after pre-patch? And do you think there's going to be testing for it, or are they just going to it is what it is, go?
I doubt there will be testing, no. But I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm sure they did say they're going to tune bosses.
I think
right?
they're just going to turbo nerf them. Yeah, like just put them in the dirt because
he already dies so fast too. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
because cutting edge is gone on the pre-patch too, right? Is it?
I think you can still get mount after pre-patch up until.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, they're kind of inconsistent with. There's been some seasons where it's like it's a week later or earlier than it's supposed to. Because I think the way cutting edge is worded, it's like before the release of the next raid, but
right.
Sometimes it's been off.
Yeah, I expect the entire raid to be blown up, though. Yeah, I expect you're not going to run into any problems with that.
That question was from Mr. Tacit Grunt. One more question from Tudor Dutes. Do any of you guys not play with specific people because they refuse to use add-ons? And does that bar a player from joining their guild?
I can't say I've ever experienced that. I mean, I've had people who are a total dunce when it comes to getting their add-on set up. It's like they always have some sort of issue. Any week or you gotta like coddle this one person, like make sure, all right, buddy, do you see this? Okay, let's check your version. All right, oh, nope, we gotta update that, right? There are people who struggle with it more than others. And some people I think are just technologically cursed, right? They just always have some sort of weird tech issue. But I've never experienced someone who just like flat out refuses. I don't think you could do that in most guilds. Maybe at the lower end that happens, but I feel like at the high end, like people kind of expect that they're going to have to do things that they don't want to do. And one of those things is add-ons.
Yeah, well, it's like,
go ahead.
You don't have to, have anything except for the fight week auras if you don't want to. But, if you don't have the fight week aura, you're going to get yelled at, right? Because like everybody needs to have that downloaded for it to work.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, and then like usually if you don't have the other stuff downloaded, you're going to suck. And that's why you're not going to get invited or played with.
So everything we've been talking about so far, of course, it feeds directly into how Blizzard wants their content to be consumed and played. So Tactics, who is all of this content as it's being designed, with all these UI changes and pruning and everything in mind? Who is this content designed for? Who is it aimed toward? Who do you think Midnight is targeting right now? The people who've been around forever? People is Blizzard trying to draw new people in? A bit of both? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's always a bit of both, right? Like they would be doing themselves a disservice if they weren't trying to get new players in constantly, right? But if you look at even like the high-end raider scene, like nobody really likes weak aura bosses, right? They're like bosses like Fractalus, bosses like Brood Twister, like Echo of Neltharion, right? Those are all bosses that probably would have been better if they were designed in such a way that didn't require weak auras, right? And it seems like Blizzard is being a bit more cognizant of that, right? They're realizing, hey, if we're going to take this stuff out, we need to give you more time to react to mechanics. We need to make mechanics clearer and that kind of thing. And I think in the raid, they've been largely successful. There's still areas to improve for sure, but they are, I think if you're worried about the raid and Mythic Plus and stuff like that, I think it's going to be solid, like it's been kind of historically. And I think there's like a little bit for everyone, but also like we've talked about, there are definitely downsides to at least the current state of the changes.
Dratnos, how many bosses have you raid tested so far?
I haven't done the testing this time around. It was really unfortunate overlaps with like MDI and other stuff I was doing. So
All right.
This tier.
Your name's getting
haven't
getting crossed off of this question. This is directed to you, but no more. Preheat and tactics. I'll just open the question to both of you guys. How do you think the raid encounters are feeling compared to Dragonflight or the War Within?
I'll start this one. So it depends on the boss, obviously, but there have been good bosses for sure. Like I've had fun on some bosses. I've also found that some bosses were just kind of like just not engaging enough. But I think that had more to do with how my class was feeling than the boss itself. Like it wasn't necessarily the boss's fault. There are some that are going to be probably in need of more cooking. I don't know. I haven't tested the boss the most recent time, but the first boss of Void Spire, or whatever that dungeon is called, the tic-tac-toe guy, that one seemed a bit raw, I would say, especially for a first boss on Mythic. But I think some of the fights are like absolute bangers. For instance, let's see. Yeah, so we've enjoyed not the first boss of the first raid. Oh, the bird. Alar boss. It's like void and light. That's a fantastic fight. Like the visuals on it almost carry it alone. And the design of it's like simple, but also has like some complexity to it in the sense that like actually performing the action that you need to do to succeed in the fight. It's going to take a lot to do, even though it's just super simple. So I think they've actually nailed it on that fight. Like they've done such a good job with that fight. There's a lot of other bosses that felt really, really strong. Probably the weaker ones, I would say, would be the two dragons. That one seemed like, we had kind of a strat after we figured out certain things with dropping the orbs and stuff and positioning the bosses that made it better. That wasn't too bad, but initially that boss just felt like, just mechanics vomit. And also the council boss in the same raid, second to last boss. That one felt a bit rough, I would say. It's funny, I actually did a normal mode pug. I cleared the entire raid. And for every boss, we had to, obviously last boss isn't available, right? But for every boss, we had to go in and I would tell them the strategy. And then, we do this and then we wipe and I tell them why we're wiping and we fix it and we keep going. We get to the council boss, second to last. And I said, all right, guys, just do the fight. I'm not going to explain anything. Just do it. And we one-shot it. And it is one of those fights where I guess it is intuitive, but like maybe a little bit. So, it's just like, you just kind of go around in a circle, right? Just stand here going around in a circle. There's not much going on there. So overall, I'd say like very good, but there's always one or two bosses that stand out as just like absolute stinkers. And I'm sure they're going to probably change things on those too.
So hypothetically speaking, let's say there's someone out there that likes raiding at a mythic level who hasn't raided since Castle Nathria. Would this be a good tier, a good expansion to jump back into mythic raiding?
It's always good to jump back into mythic raiding. We need more mythic raiders out there. If you have any interest in this, seriously, it's so fun. Like the experience of going in there with 19 other people and coordinating and overcoming a challenge. It's something that you won't really find in a lot of games. It's the reason why I love this game, is just the feeling of getting that kill with your team and figuring out problem solving as a group. These are things that I've just always really enjoyed. And I think a lot of people will find that they're really, really fun. And if you're on the edge, if you're deciding like, is it worth it? I would try it out just to see if it's something that you would enjoy. Yeah, I think every expansion is a good time to get into mythic raiding.
Yeah, I was definitely asking for a friend. No. Definitely asking for a friend. No worries there. Preheat, does Mythic Plus on the beta feel more execution driven right now or reaction driven compared to past expansions, specifically the last, one or two expansions?
It's driven by how your tank pulls.
Really? Tactics,
if your tank,
you hear that? Take notes. This is all
it
you,
is
tactics.
All because you have so many less tools to deal with things and so much less visibility on what's happening. So if you pull certain packs together, that's always bad, right? Like you don't want to pull certain mobs in dungeons, they're banned mobs. But I would say that's even more true now. And if you pull certain groups together, especially a bunch of caster mobs, you're just so cooked. It's unbelievable. So if you have a tank that's experienced and knows what they're doing and you just kind of go slow and steady, you're probably going to be just fine.
Yeah, because they have definitely done what they said in terms of pruning the overall quantity of spellcasters and stuff like that. But especially when you're in like an open dungeon, like Pit of Saron is like a good example. You can pull a series of packs and have like 6 casters in those. Like if you pull 2 packs together or 3 packs together, or you could pull 3 packs together and you could have 1 caster. And so like the knowledge of the routing in some of those dungeons that still have a few you know, a little bit excessive on in the caster department is definitely, it's still required to know those things. And it's, I think the clarity is a big thing, right? Because like even me, for example, we were doing testing this past week in like Magister's Terrace, and I'm just getting owned. We just pulled like 2 packs together. There's like 1 cast. I'm like, what is going on here? Turns out one of these mobs, which there's 3 of in this pull we did, is just getting this stacking buff that is just slamming the tank. And I just could not see it on my UI. Like my UI was not able to show that information. And I think that's a current big problem in Mythic Plus specifically, is like a lot of that stuff is not clear.
Yeah, it's weird because other games seem to have a good solution for this, right? If you look at like in Path of Exile or like Diablo, they'll highlight a mob in a certain color or make it have a certain effect if it does a certain thing, right? I feel like this is something that would be a really easy win for Blizzard. If it's a caster, maybe it's got like a blue mana aura around it, right? If it's a guy who, busts your tank's face open, maybe they got like bloody weapon or something, right? Just make it like some sort of visual cue so that you don't have to have something on your nameplate, so you don't have to memorize the name of every mob to know what the heck they do, right? It would be so much easier to know as a tank what to do there if you could have those visual cues. And I feel like maybe they're putting too much responsibility on the tanks with this design. Like, that's my worry. And we need more tanks in Mythic Plus too, right? And if you're making that job even harder and more punishing, and people are going to blame the tank more, it might be a worse experience for them.
I think it's a really good point of like a shared visual language of, like we know what a soak means now, right? We see those little circles with the little pillar coming out of it, and it's like, oh, somebody should soak that, right? And like, you don't know exactly how the mechanic works, but if it's got one of those over it and nobody's standing in it, somebody should probably go stand in it, right? Like that's a very clear and understood thing in modern WoW. And I think doing something like that for, important volley casters or whatever, and tank busters, like you said, would be a really good way to make it, again, a little, because that also solves that problem of what did I die to, right? Like you sort of get an idea of like, oh, I died because my tank died, and there's a red glowy mob in the pack. Like that was probably the issue. We should see what that thing does.
A game that does this really well is Fellowship. If you've been playing that, like usually the mobs that beat up the tank, they are mean and red, right? And they have even stuff on the nameplate still indicate that these mobs are like a more challenging pack if they're like leveled up or whatever. Due to certain affixes. I think that they should just absolutely rip that off, right? Just pull it into WoW. It would be so beneficial. That and the focus interrupt system in that game, where people can assign their interrupt to the mob, and then everyone can see the cooldown on that player's one interrupt. They know that player is going to get that interrupt, right? Whatever's next there. Really good features, and I think these are the features that Blizzard really needs to focus on. If they're going to cull everything, I think it's good. Even if they didn't want to cull all the add-ons, I think it still would be really good to add these things, right? More visibility, just intuitively seeing that this pack is deadly in one way or another.
Yeah, I think the more visual cues, the better. We had another great question come in from Tudor Doots here, and I'm being sincere, even though the name is funny. Tudor Doots asks, would 10-man Mythic raiding later in the tier bring more Mythic Raiders into the scene? Because this person specifically, he says he plays Mythic Plus with 9 people off and on, but getting another 10 plus people for Mythic raiding, it's impossible. So do you think the Mythic 10 raiding should exist? Yes or no? And should it be from the onset of a tier, or should it come later, if at all? Anyone want to take that question?
I'll talk about it. I think it's a cool idea. Something I've heard people suggest is to, like, on the 0.5 patch, right? Just open up 10-man Mythic, because obviously the whole reason there's like a static difficulty or static 20-man Mythic now is because of the difficulty variance, right? Between like 10 and 25, it's kind of hard to tune those to be the same difficulty, and it kind of got pushed together into one like final difficulty in Mythic, right? And so I think when you're halfway through a season, if they release a slightly easier 10-man version where you could get similar gear, it kind of almost be like a catch-up system in terms of gear too. Is that a bad thing? I personally have no issue with that. And if it gets more people to play Mythic content, I think it would only be positive.
I think the real issue here, though, is the lockout system for Mythic. It's not necessarily the group size. It's the fact that once you go and you kill a couple bosses on Mythic, you can't do that with any other people. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where you do a pug And then for some reason, you're going to do 2 bosses, but for some reason, someone just leaves right away after they kill the first boss. And it's like, come on, man. And then, you know, a couple other people follow suit. And now you're struggling to kill that second boss for your vault, right? I just think this is just a system that like needs some sort of update. Like it doesn't feel right to me. I would love to see like some, lax restrictions on the Mythic rating. But I am actually like very against 10-man. I've been there before, like they've been down this road. We've seen kind of how that works, and the tuning is always just kind of weird. I personally think that they should enforce a certain group size. I think they should just relax the requirements of, you know, once you kill this boss, you're just done, right? No one else can come in here, basically. Or would, right? Because there's like no incentive to.
Right. Tactics, do you think that the current raid difficulty, Mythic Plus difficulty, do you think it feels earned? Or are there moments where it's just frustrating and you're just banging your head against the wall? How do you think it feels right now?
I mean, I don't think that's like the problem with the difficult. Like the frustrating parts, I would say, is the lack of clarity in how things are displayed, how things show up on the UI, right? I think that's where the frustrating moments come for me. Like that example from Magister's Terrace, right? I've died to that mob now. I know, hey, you cannot pull more than 2 of those mobs ever, and that's going to be fine. I don't need to see that debuff anymore or buff or whatever it was. I know. But for people that don't know, right, that's very frustrating. You have no idea what's going on in that situation. It's not so much that the dungeons themselves are tuned to be too difficult. It's just the information displays is not as good as it's been in the past, right?
Dragonflight, how well do you think Blizzard is balancing approachability, something we talked about earlier, with meaningful difficulty, especially for those, you know, high-end players?
Yeah, I think those two don't have to be, like, you don't have to sacrifice the one for the other, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of, you know, like, putting a lot of the difficulty into the fight. I think the fight design is going to be really what this lives or dies off of, so it's kind of hard to tell just based off of the testing, which, like I said, I didn't do. I've just watched, and you know, even just beta in general. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on how it actually shakes out. Like we'll really get a good answer to this question when we get this first tier and we can see, you know, how it all goes. Because I do think basically they need to shift the difficulty into doing an interesting fight mechanic with your brain and not with a weak aura, and that is something that they kind of haven't had to do for a couple of years. So be a fun challenge to see if they can get it on the first try, or if they get if they at least get close. I think people will be pretty optimistic about the future.
Yeah, we'll see how they do this first tier. I mean, I'm going into this expansion I'm doing my best just to be like, you know what, it is what it is. Just have fun. Don't overthink it too much. Try not to get upset about too much. Just have fun. So we'll see how it all happens and unfolds.
Yeah, that ties back into your expectations too, right?
Yeah,
it's about just got to lower those expectations a little bit. Just be a chill, and I'm sure it's going to be a great time.
Fingers crossed. Preheat, last direct question for this topic. We'll move on to our last topic, but at this point in development, I mean, listen, people are on Christmas break. We have New Year's right around the corner. You know, they said in their blue post, I think it was last week, that not much is going to come for the next couple of weeks, guys. Buckle up. But at this point in development, what do you think can still change? What do you think needs to still change before that pre-patch, before the launch?
There's probably about like 5 or 6 specs that need more cooking. But I think for the most part, everything is going to kind of ship the way it is right now with just slight tweaks. I don't think anyone should really expect anything major at this point. You know, if your spec has like a serious problem and you're playing it and it's like, this is just not going to work, right? That is probably going to be something that Blizzard looks into if people make enough noise about it, right? But if your spec is one that doesn't have a big player base or anyone who's really vocal, you might just be stuck with it. That's just kind of how it goes, right? So I would expect that for the most part, this is ready for delivery.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on. Like we're gonna get what we get, and you just gotta roll with the punches, man. We're gonna move on to our last topic about player agency and guardrails. Blizzard, I dare say, I think it's pretty clear that they want to protect players a bit more from themselves in Midnight compared to other expansions. So let's talk about whether that's good design or loss of freedom and tactics. First question for you. Where do these guardrails that they're implementing, where does it actually genuinely help players at this point?
I mean, I think the whole protecting players from themselves is probably a good, because like here's the thing, right? Like if there is a way to get an advantage using a combat weak aura, raiders are going to do it, right? Like the world first guild does it, and that kind of trickles down, and everyone just does it because it makes your life easier, right? In the long run, even if it's not fun, right? A great example is this whole like macro pressing to activate a weak aura whenever you get like a debuff thing, right? That was not fun. No one liked that. And I think that is kind of a situation where, if they're successful in all this stuff and removing combat weak auras and all that stuff from encounters, and that's no longer required because they're now giving us more time to react to these mechanics because they know we're not using weak auras. I think that's kind of a net positive, right? Again, the boss examples like Brood Twister and like Echo of Neltharion, which were kind of reliant on those things. I'm sure there's more, but not many people enjoyed that aspect of those fights.
Yeah, it's funny because the macro press when you get a debuff thing was gameplay that arose because Blizzard was trying to change how we interact with, like, they tried to kill fight weak auras by making private auras, right? And then that led to the macro press disaster. So I think that is an interesting cautionary tale for, like, you don't always accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with this, and there's certainly some risk that the add-on changes on beta right now are gonna go down a similar path where it's like, hang on, we're doing the same things we used to do, but it's more annoying, but we're still doing them, and it's like worse. Because I think it's a great example where the Fire Act macro press, for instance, was way worse than if it had just been the way it was before. Maybe that was a good transition to something that will be better in the future, though, right? And that maybe is the Midnight version, but maybe there'll be a couple of patches in the Midnight version where things are also scuffed in some way.
Yeah, please. I don't want a tic-tac-toe map to pop up on my screen and tell me the optimal way to play tic-tac-toe.
Yeah,
you just need like the smartest person in your guild to always tell you where to go, right? Just one
That's
person.
Another worry.
Like,
I do have a little bit of a worry that like a lot of the fight design space that has opened up here is going to be landing on the one person in the guild who will have all 8 world markers bound and like has to just do it all in their head and tell people where to go. That is something that is another fail case that I'm a little bit worried about, although I don't think that would be that bad compared to some of the other last disasters.
The last boss, which we accidentally saw pulls of, which was also interesting, is kind of that, right? Like you're going to have someone, probably your tank, bound to have all the world markers bound and just put the order people are supposed to stand in using the world markers.
Yeah, like looking at the version that we saw, that little clip, like I think it's fast enough and easy enough that you wouldn't need to do that. And also it's a heroic mechanic. The Mythic version has like a Star Augur meet a partner thing as well, so I don't know. A lot's going to depend on what else is going on at the same time as it, but yeah, I hope we'll avoid a situation where the mechanic is entirely solved by one person doing, being good at placing world markers, because that's going to have to be me, and I don't like doing that, but I will, but I hate it.
You're just going to go ahead and accept your fate.
Yeah. I mean, it's most end bosses, usually the tank has to place some markers, right? Like it's kind of hard to avoid, but there's hope springs eternal.
Dratinus, where do you think these guardrails start to feel a bit annoying or restrictive at this point?
I don't think any of it worries me from the side of being annoying or restrictive. Again, the main thing that I'm worried about is them failing to accomplish the objective and just making the process of circumventing it be more annoying than it just using the weak auras right now, but still doing the same thing. But I really get why they're trying to do all the things they're trying to do. So I think it's all worth it. Like all the little annoyances and stuff will be worth it if we get the upsides. It's just in order to get the upsides, they have to also patch all of the things that all the little holes that people are finding, and also put in base UI versions of the things that we think there should be a base UI version. Again, like Maelstrom weapon stacks. I should not need an add-on to have good tracking of Maelstrom weapon. Like that should be base UI or or this whole add-on change is doomed.
Yeah, I think the worst case is that they take the strategy of kind of doing the half measure and then they move that over to combat design as well when it comes to the rating counters, because then we're going to be back where we are right now, but it's just going to be worse, right? So I think they kind of need to stick to their guns in this case. And you know, a lot of us players who use a lot of add-ons and play at the high end, we don't like these combat add-ons, right? It's just that we aren't convinced that they can really give us the alternative. What we're really afraid of, or, you know, I'm just speaking for myself here, but what I'm really afraid of is them giving the restrictions, making it worse, walking back certain aspects of it. Now you can still do it. You just have to do 5 different steps to do the same thing. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah. Tutor Dudes, man, you're on fire, Tutor Dudes. Another question I want to send your way real quick, everyone. Is it worth, and this is all theoretical potential, blah, blah, blah. Is it worth maybe season 1 and season 2 of Midnight possibly being worse for season 3 and the Last Titan to thrive? Do you think that's how it's going to unfold?
I think that would be a good trade. I don't know. I think if we knew for sure that we were going to lose 1 or 2 seasons and then it would all be great, I don't know. I think that is probably a fair trade. The people would definitely be unhappy for a while, but you know, WoW has tanked people being unhappy for a whole Shadowlands before. So
I mean, season 1, season 2, that's a whole year, right? That's
yeah. I mean, it's a long time, but like, I think we, you know, if they successfully accomplish all the things they're trying to here, it's a big, good thing that they would be accomplishing.
Tactics, I saw you nodding along right before Dratnos said something. Did you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to like, how bad is it? You know, like if it's like, you know, the raid bosses are still designed well, they're still really fun, whatever, but it's just like you have these workarounds that are kind of annoying that we're playing with. I think, you know, that would be fine, right? Like in that situation where of giving up 2 seasons, dealing with the weird workarounds, and then they, you know, fix everything as it were. But if it's like, I don't know, it was like what the time I think the most people ever quit WoW was like the Korthia patch. If it's like that and like the game just tanks, it might not be ideal to wait for that long, right?
Here's the thing, like, I don't think we're escaping a couple of seasons like
of pain, yeah.
The worst case is that it's bad for a couple of seasons and then it doesn't get better. I think at this point we're locked into this, like, there's no way they're walking back a lot of this stuff, at least for a while, right? Like, you think about the Shadowlands is a great example, right? Where like Covenant locking took them a year longer than it should have to walk that back. And that one was like a very obvious bad thing that had super minimal upsides and a lot of big downsides. This one has a lot more clear upsides. So I think what will happen is, like, worst case, they will be launching it, tinkering with it. They're not going to give up for at least a couple of seasons. Like, they wouldn't give up and walk this thing back unless it was a complete disaster. And even if it was a complete disaster, I think they would still give it a few seasons. So, you know, if that happens and then it ends up being good eventually and there were some growing pains along the way, that is a lot better than if they have to walk it back. If they have to turn it off after doing it for whole expansion, right? Like, that would be, we would have just lost a bunch of time for nothing.
Who's got the add-on ripcord? Where is it? I need to pull that thing, man.
Yeah, I mean, what I think, like, especially with them, you know, kind of peeling back on restrictions now, like you guys have been talking about with like Maelstrom Weapon and stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if like they spend the expansion kind of iterating on all the stuff that they've put in so far that kind of seem not totally there, so we have like a final good product for like the Last Titan that actually encompasses that, and then there's another shift of peeling back on add-ons again. Like that, it seems kind of like the direction they're moving in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I do think it would be a little tough for WoW's like bottom line, because in a lot of ways, Dragonflight was exciting, not just because of Dragonflight, but because of what it set up for the future. War Within is also kind of like exciting, not just for War Within, but for what it means for the future, right? And like, if that's true for Midnight as well, I don't know, at some point there has to be an expansion that's like poggers on its own, like standing on its own merit entirely in the way that, you know, Legion and stuff did. And 3 in a row without that might be tough. I don't know what the state of retail's, you know, money situation is or anything like that, but that could be bad news.
I mean, they just released the Brutus Oregon, so I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure a lot
True,
of
yeah, just put another one of those in the shop.
fine. Preheat, with the UI changes in mind and how PvE is shaping up in Midnight, is Blizzard designing more for new players or long-term invested players these first couple of seasons?
I think it's pretty clear that they have an initiative that they need to do certain things to try and attract new players, right? But they know that a lot of their players have been playing for a long time. A lot of us are really hooked in this game, and they need to keep us moderately happy, right? There's a certain level of discomfort they're allowing us to feel, but I think that overall, I want to be optimistic about it. Like, I want to believe that they will actually pull in more people by doing this stuff. I know just personally, like people I know in real life, trying to get them to play WoW, this is always kind of the thing that rubs them the wrong way, right? The having to set up a bunch of add-ons, having too many abilities, having too much going on. That's what kind of turns them off. So, yeah, I think that I think it's in a pretty good place. You know, UI aside, or like weird exceptions with UI aside, I think the game's in a pretty good place to do that. We'll see if it happens, though.
Yeah, I mean, God, we could go on this huge tangent about new players and how the game feels year over year and whatnot. I'm sure that would take us half an hour. But maybe we can circle back to that in a moment. Tactics, I want to talk real quick about comparing Midnight to past expansions. Is Midnight giving players more room to figure things out on their own?
I mean, certainly, right? For like, especially if you're talking about like raid as an example, right? There's lots of things in the raid right now which you are kind of, figuring out yourself instead of, hey, the weak aura is going to assign you to stand on the left wall or right wall, right? And that you just go. So there's a little bit more of like, hey, I need to make an on the fly decision where I'm going based on what's going on around me. And I think that's good. Like that aspect of it. There is some caveats, right? Like they need to give you enough time to make that decision, which is something historically they've given you in a lot of cases not that much time, which is why a weak aura had to solve it, right? Because you just didn't have enough time to make the correct or a reasonable decision. But I think generally from raid testing, I have a positive feeling about how they're going to be able to execute on that.
Dratnus, if Blizzard leans too hard into all of these guardrails that they're setting up, what do you think the biggest risk is for the game's long-term health?
Yeah, again, I think that if we have a situation where it's like you still have all the complexities of add-ons, but they're more annoying and like the disaster case would be if somebody is trying to get into WoW and instead of being told, hey, go download weak auras and download these, a weak aura, get LVI and weak auras, if it's instead like, okay, download this little fix and this tweak and this fix and this guy's little add-on package and this guy's fork of this guy's add-on package because they stopped updating it or whatever, like that would, I think, be the really fail case.
Do you think that's where things are right now? Like,
I think there's some danger if the philosophy of what they're doing with, again, Maelstrom Weapon, Soul Fragments, enemy nameplates, those decisions strike me as ones that have been made in the past few weeks that the big risk of those is landing in that world, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Preheat, what kind of player behavior do you think these guardrails are trying to prevent? And is that problem worth the cost itself?
It's all just a part of the cat and mouse game. How do you keep it so that things aren't solved by add-ons, right? And it's not exactly clear. Like they can try to do things. We saw this with the hidden auras, right? That, there's still a way to work around it. There's always going to be some little way. Even if they remove the whole coloring workaround that we have for nameplates right now. One thing I heard, this is kind of a funny anecdote, but they talked about maybe taking each mob's portrait because, it shows on the nameplate and then zooming in really, really big and then having it be a single pixel and overlaying that on the nameplate so that it's colored of the one pixel on that frame. And that way you would always have this mob is brown and this one's green and this one's blue, right? It would be consistent. You wouldn't know what those colors mean, but you would be able to figure it out over time, right? There's always going to be something like this that the add-on makers will latch onto.
What's the middle pixel color on this guy's portrait? And then we just make that full screen.
Exactly.
Yeah, genius.
There's always going to be some workaround like that, right? So the guardrails, they're trying to prevent things like this. But the problem is they have to give basically 0 for them to land this, right? Because any little thing, any little crack and the foundation, the add-on authors are going to get in there and they're going to build out whatever they need to do. So is it worth the cost? I think if they can actually fulfill what they promised, and at least if they just get rid of combat add-ons for the most part, I would say yes. I would really hope that we don't have certain combat add-ons anymore. I hope that they're not required, right? Because a lot of these combat add-ons are really only there because the design has been this way for so long that Blizzard feels the need that they have to design around the add-ons, and then they make the timing shorter and they make it harder to deal with. And so then the add-on authors have to do it their way, and it's kind of like each side is kind of like escalating the situation, right? If we can like get rid of that situation and land it and perfectly nail this, that'll be great. Even if it's not perfect, if it's just better than it is now, if we don't have to go and get these giant packs, I would be happy. I would say that yes, it is probably worth the cost. But I'm always a little bit cautious when I see certain mechanics being used in the raid where it seems like maybe it's just there's like an obvious solution to this to be intuitive, but they just didn't do it, right? I don't really have like a great example from the current raid right now. I think they've actually done a pretty good job, but in the coming raids, if there's stuff like, for instance, the jailer mechanics, right, where you had to go into the holes with the bombs, I think something like this, like it just needs to have different symbols on each one. Like there needs to be something clear to the player that like shows you like, oh, I'm doing this with this mechanic, or like on Fractalus, right? If you were to translate that over to no add-ons, perhaps have each of the marks look different, right? And then you can tell the people, if you have this mark, you go here, right? There just needs to be like some system to find the solution that isn't just, well, we just got to do it faster, or we just have to download something. One guy's going to have to call it all out, right? We have the savant who's just going to tell everyone where to go. It's really hard for them to find it, and I do empathize with them because they've really set themselves up for this massive problem to overtake in such a short time, and years of it being this way, and player expectations being one way and having to be shifted. So yeah, they've got their work cut out for them for sure.
With that said, with that in mind, look, if we look at Blizzard's track record, if we look at everything that's been done and developed during alpha and beta, best guess, do you think they are going to stick that landing preheat? Is that something that you think that they are capable of and will do?
I think they'll stick it enough for people to still have fun with the game. Like, we'll complain for sure. A lot of us will complain regardless. Let's be honest, right? WoW players aren't exactly the easiest. We aren't the easiest consumers to keep happy. In fact, there's probably thousands of people who haven't even played WoW for, going on a decade now, who still go on Wowhead and leave a comment every time they see a new article and still talk smack on Reddit, right? It's one of those games where people are so passionate about it that it just kind of never leaves your blood system or your right. But it's I think that they can do it well enough. I have confidence that they will do it well enough to keep us engaged.
Something that one of my viewers, Jeff, said in chat, it's not specifically a question, but I do want to mention, he says, none of this that we're talking about will end the battle with add-ons and whatnot. It's just going to move it to a different playing field. How true do you think that statement is, Dratnos?
Yeah, I mean, I think, is there going to be some push and pull of, Blizzard breaking one thing and somebody coming up with a clever new workaround and then them having to break that? Like, yeah, that is going to happen. I don't know. Ultimately, Blizzard do hold a lot of cards that can break stuff. So it's just a question of like, will there be collateral damage that they deem to be too much when it comes to each individual add-on that they have to break? But yeah, I mean, at least short term, right now, the arms race is certainly still on, where coming up with all these workarounds and getting all this functionality back is something that a lot of smart add-on devs are working on. But at the end of the day, if Blizzard, if it's a high enough priority for Blizzard, they can win that war. It is not a foregone conclusion. Like it's not unwinnable by any stretch.
Right. Real quick, I want to circle back to something. I can't remember exactly. I think it was Preheat said something, and I said maybe we can circle back to that in a minute. And I do want to. Listen, this game's 20 years old. All four of us have been playing it for however many decades collectively. Blah blah blah. We've talked about new player experience and how do you keep people invested long term. I mean, this is a 20-year-old game, and they've reinvented it a dozen times over. How can they get people who have never played WoW or played it, 10, 15, 20 years ago, how can they get them interested in and plug back in and involved in this process of leveling up, normal, heroic, mythic, mythic plus, normal, heroic, LFR, normal, heroic, mythic rating. Is that something that can even feasibly be done to keep the game sustained for another 20 years? I mean, I guess it can. Like, of course, I can't imagine WoW will be dead in the next 20 years, but I don't know. Again, I have no specific question outlined on my sheet here, but I'm curious if anyone has an opinion or a take on that.
I think they're doing a good job with the things they're doing right now, at least when it comes to what they stated, right? And what we're getting in terms of features. Housing is a big one. That's something that's bringing back a lot of players, right? And having the ability to just like customize more. It's kind of funny. It's it's almost like the opposite direction of some of the other initiatives, right? But yeah, I think customization as an option is great. I think customization as a necessity, that's where we really have the problem. It's just in order to solve that problem, they also have to go overboard on certain other areas. But I think that they're doing the right things right now, at least in theory.
Tactics 20 years from now, I mean, God, man, I'll be pushing 60. Like, how do you get people interested in this game over these next 20 years? Do you think that Blizzard can, or do you think they're going to be shifting to WoW 2, as people like to keep mentioning over and over year after year?
Nah, but I mean, I think like Pri was saying, I think housing was a huge step forward, right? Like, this has been something people have been asking for years, right? Like, I mean, even like Garrisons was like the first kind of iteration of it that kind of flopped. But I think they've done a really, really good job at housing, right? And in terms of allowing people to be creative. I think there was like I don't remember who was, one of the devs was tweeting about it, and it was like, hey, we were going to break the fact that people were making these floating houses, but you know what? It's kind of cool. So we're just going to make it easier to do interesting stuff like that, which I think is obviously like a great philosophy from them. And I think doing more stuff like that is only going to be positive for not only the existing players, but also for bringing in new players. So I think they're on the right track, and I think they've just, it's kind of this constant game of like, how do you bring people in, right? They're going to have to constantly adapt. It's a lot of work to do that, but I think so far they're doing a pretty decent job going into midnight.
Did you guys see J.B's response to that tweet from the dev? He said, I'm paraphrasing here. The dev said, we saw 5 or 6 examples of really cool houses that were floating. We were going to break it and blah, blah, blah. And J.B's like, what if I showed you 5 or 6 really cool weak auras? Would that change anything?
I submitted a weak aura to that list. The immersive spinning crane kick weak aura. Have you guys ever used this one?
Yeah, that's a fun one.
It's a really good. It's whenever you press spinning crane kick, it spins your camera around at the speed your character's spinning.
Oh my God.
It's immersive, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you being here so much today. We're gonna do a quick round the table response to this last question. Dradnos, we'll start with you. If you had to give players one piece of advice going into midnight, one mindset to have, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm gonna steal Preheat's line of just like, don't worry about it too much. Lower your expectations or temper your expectations depending on what they are. If your expectations are high around housing, I think keep them high. That is obviously is great and will continue to be great. And we didn't talk about that much this episode, but I think there's a very good chance that when people look back at midnight, the big thing people remember is going to be that's the expansion where housing came out, right? Like all the stuff about add-ons or whatever. Compare the amount of people that affects compared to the amount of people that WoW having good player housing effects is probably not even anywhere close, right? These probably 2 orders of magnitude more or something like that. So if you're excited about that, continue to be excited about that. If you're worried about add-ons or stuff like that, I would say, there's certainly things to be worried about, but just you're going to have a lot more fun if you kind of just sit back, watch what happens, play the expansion if it's fun, don't play it if it's not fun, and don't stress too much about it. And, stuff will probably change if it's really bad as well.
Yeah, I'm sure this game will be very different come 13.0 in a year or two. Preheat, what about you, man? One piece of advice, one mindset. What would it be?
So I coach a lot of players, like improving their damage, and talk with a lot of people, just like one-on-one, about, what their goals are in this game and their expectations and how they can achieve those goals. And this is just like advice I always give people. It's if you don't have a guild already, you should join a guild, even if you don't plan to raid in a big way. If you don't like want to be cutting edge or hardcore or whatever, you should still find other people to play with. It's like shocking to me how many people play World of Warcraft and just like don't want to join up with a group of people. It seems they're always saying like, oh, I want people to play with. I want to be, doing Mythic Plus with these people. Are you in a guild? No. Well, you should probably, join up with people that you can play with, right? And it's not just like joining the guild in trade chat that's just trying to like spam invite people, right? I'm talking about like a guild where the players actually do stuff together. I think you'll find that this game is so much more fulfilling when you are enjoying it with others and going in, more static groups. And it is an MMO, right? You got to be playing with the other players to get the full experience.
Little follow-up question for you specifically. Do you think Blizzard could be doing a better job in-game, out-of-game, connecting people in that case?
The tools exist. Do they fulfill the goal or requirements? That's a little iffy. I mean, there's so many tools out there now, though. It's like I swear it's like I never really got to experience this, but it's like the dating apps. You've got like a million different apps to try and find people to play with these days, and just do whatever works for you. Find people, but I always find like just word of mouth is always the best way to end up finding people that you vibe with, right? And if you don't vibe with certain people, just try to find other people. You're not stuck there, right? No reason to stick around.
Tactics, what about you, buddy? One piece of advice, one mindset going into midnight. What would it be?
I think what I want to address is like a lot of I've seen a lot of dooming, specifically related to like classes and the pruning that has happened. And I think a lot of people kind of hold on to like the initial alpha release where they're like Fire Mage is dead, Resto Shaman is dead, that kind of stuff. And what I would say is kind of go in with an open mind, because there's been a lot of iteration. I think what Preheat was talking, there's probably like a handful of specs that still need some work, but the vast majority of specs are in a pretty solid spot. I would say some of them are even like improved, like we're talking about Guardian, which is like actually a little bit more complex. And so I would say go into the changes with a bit of an open mind. Don't listen to the latest content creator doom post video, and just see how you actually feel about your specs changes once you've actually played it.
To add that, like, don't go to your class Discord either. Like, you're just gonna see like, yeah, my class is actually unplayable. It's complete dog water. Like, it's the worst it's ever been, right? I feel like the attitudes in those echo chamber kind of situations get very, very toxic quick. And yeah, the tier list stuff, like, if you're gonna enjoy that content, it's just like, it's like cotton candy, right? Don't expect to get some nutritional value from it, right? Just enjoy, sit back and enjoy, have a laugh.
Oh, I think it's sound advice. Thank you guys for being here. We're going to go around the table one more time, but real quick, next week, episode 9, we have a woo. We have Mad Skills TV and LB Ninja. They'll be sitting down with us talking about all things midnight again. It'll be post-Christmas. I don't think I mentioned Merry Christmas to anyone out there who celebrates this, but Merry Christmas to anyone out there. Enjoy yourselves over these next few days, this next week. But Dratnos, one more time, where can people find you? Plug yourself, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, youtube.com/Dratnos. The Pod EC is the podcast I do with Max and Dorky about PvE and stuff. And I haven't streamed in like a year, but maybe I'll stream again sometime. You never know. Same handle on Twitch.
Preheat, where can people find you, man?
Twitch.tv/Preheat, also on YouTube, same name, Preheat. And then if you're looking for coaching, Metafy is where I do that. So just Google Metafy Preheat, and yeah, hit me up.
Yeah, and real quick tactics before you say it again, YouTube description has all of these links. So please go follow these guys, sub to these guys, talk to these guys, pick their brains, so on and so forth. All right, Tactics, take it away. Round it up here, buddy.
Yeah, I'm just Tactics on all platforms. You get that when you spell your name wrong, so that's good. YouTube is where I post most of my videos, but I also stream on Twitch. I also occasionally post pictures of dogs and food on Twitter. So yeah, we're all Tactics.
You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to let you guys get out of here. You've given me more than enough time. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here and doing a great job. My name is Brutall. Get out of here, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode. And again, go follow these guys and show them some love. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. And that's a wrap on episode 8 of Brutally Honest, a WoW podcast. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you guys listening, tuning in, hanging out, have fun. Feel free to leave comments, and I will do my best to engage and respond and so on and so forth. But next week, as mentioned, we have a WoW, we have LB Ninja, and we have Mad Skills TV coming in. That episode is going to be really early compared to when this episode or when this stuff normally launches. Because Owu lives on the other side of the planet, we're going to be starting at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. So it's going to be an early morning for me next week, but it's going to be a fun one. In any case, thank you for being here. Go enjoy everyone's content. Follow, subscribe, like, blah, 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 blah. You know the drill. My name's Brutal. See you next time, and thank you again for being here.